Welcome back once again, all of my low carb friends, and for those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. Today I have another very easy keto bread recipe for you. Today I am going to show you how to make a quick and easy keto baguette loaf. Now a while back I showed you how to make keto Italian bread, but this specifically is a full-size baguette loaf. So it's got a slightly different texture, and I am going to be specifically using it to make my bruschetta chicken, which by the time you see this, I probably will have already put out the short for the bruschetta chicken. But if you would like a printable version of this recipe, you can check out my website at janetsdeliciouslowcarbkitchen.com. You can find a printable version of this recipe and other goodies there for you. And if you're new to the channel and you want to see lots of easy, delicious, low-carb keto recipes, make sure you click that subscribe button and click the notification bell that's right next to the subscribe button. That way you can be notified every time I put out videos, at least every Wednesday and Saturday. And if you'd like to help support the channel, make sure you scroll down in the description of the video. You'll see some affiliate links. Anytime you purchase anything using those affiliate links, a small portion of your purchase will go to me and help support the channel. So while we do all that, let's get cooking.
Preheat your oven to 400 degrees. Line an 8.5 by 4.5 inch loaf pan with parchment paper and allow the paper to hang over the sides just a little bit so you can easily remove the loaf once it's done baking. If you don't have an 8.5 by 4.5, an 8 by 4 will work just fine. You'll just need to bake it for maybe 1 to 2 minutes longer. Then set your loaf pan aside for a minute. In a large mixing bowl, combine 112 grams or around 1 cup of coconut flour, 15 grams or around 1 tablespoon of baking powder, 9 grams or around 1 tablespoon of instant dry yeast. This is strictly for flavor. It doesn't help with rising. I tell you guys that every time I use yeast, and I will continue to tell you that. It's just to help make your bread taste more like traditional bread, and in this particular recipe, it definitely makes a very big difference. But if you don't have any instant dry yeast, you don't have to use it. Your loaf will turn out just fine without it. Add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt and 2 grams or about a 1/2 teaspoon of xanthan gum. If you don't have xanthan gum, you can use psyllium husk powder or cognac powder. You want to add this because this is going to help keep your dough flexible so that you can shape it into a baguette-shaped loaf, and it's also going to help keep your dough stretchy so that while it's baking, it can expand a little bit and you can have a slightly rised loaf. As I've told you guys many times, coconut flour baked goods do not rise very much at all, but this does expand a little bit and it does rise a little bit. So you really do need to have the xanthan gum or some type of xanthan gum substitute in this. If you want to, you can add some dry seasonings or dry flavoring just to give your bread a little bit of a different flavor, especially if you're oversensitive to coconut flour taste. I'm wanting to use this for my bruschetta chicken, so I'm adding a teaspoon of garlic powder and a teaspoon of dry oregano. Sift everything together until everything is fully combined and there are no lumps in the dry ingredients. Add 3 large room temperature eggs. Make sure they are room temperature so they stir in smoothly. Stir the eggs into the dry ingredients until everything is fully combined and all the dry ingredients are moist. Add a 1/2 cup of butter that's been melted and cooled. Make sure it is cooled. You do not want to add hot butter. And 120 grams or around a 1/2 cup of room temperature sour cream or plain Greek yogurt. Again, you want this to be room temperature. Room temperature ingredients always combine better and make for a smoother, softer dough, which in bread recipes is important because the result will be a smoother, more fluffy loaf. Also, if you are using the plain yogurt instead of sour cream, make sure you are using Greek yogurt. You want that thickness in this particular recipe. It's not only going to add moisture, but between this and the xanthan gum or xanthan gum substitute, it gives a better binding to the bread so that we don't have to use a lot of eggs. I always try to use as minimal eggs as I have to in my bread recipes because I do not want my bread to taste like a baked omelet. Stir everything together until everything is fully combined and a smooth dough has formed. Scrape down the sides of the bowl and push your dough to the center of the bowl. Then form your dough into a smooth ball. Then we're going to test the dough and make sure we have the right texture. Take a portion of the dough in your hands and just roll it around in your hands, kind of stretch it, play with it a little bit. You want to make sure that it's holding its shape and going to have a little bit of stretch and flexibility to it. If it seems like it's wet and the dough is sticking to your fingers, then just add very, very small amounts of coconut flour until the dough is no longer sticky. If it seems dry and seems like it's not holding together and keeping its shape, then just add very, very small amounts more of your room temperature sour cream or Greek yogurt, whichever one you're using. When you're sure you have the right texture of dough, shape or roll your dough into a fat oval shape that's roughly about the length of your loaf pan, whatever size loaf pan you're using. You want it to be able to fit in your loaf pan without being scrunched. When you're rolling this and shaping this, make sure that you keep the dough nice and smooth. You do not want any cracks in your dough. If there's cracks, then when it starts to expand in the oven, it's going to crack more. So make sure it stays smooth. If you do see any cracks, just dampen your fingers and rub the cracks out a little bit. Once the dough is shaped into an oval, place the dough into your prepared loaf pan. Then use your hands and just slightly flatten the top of the dough a little bit. You don't want a rounded top on your bread when you're using coconut flour because of all the moisture that's inside of the bread. Once it starts baking and steaming, if the top of the loaf is really rounded, 9 times out of 10, it's going to crack. Even if you score the bread, it's still going to crack a little bit. You're wanting to keep those rounded oval ends, but you just want to flatten that top down enough to where it doesn't have an arch over the top of the oval. Then use a sharp knife and cut about 4 to 5 diagonal short slashes into the top of your loaf. Make sure when you're cutting these that you keep them short to where they're not going from edge to edge of your loaf, and that you keep some space in between each one of the slashes. You don't want them right on top of each other. Also, make sure you are not cutting all the way through. This again is going to help your bread to be able to vent and prevent cracking. Set that aside for just a second. In a small bowl, whisk together 1 egg and 1 tablespoon of water until this is fully combined. Make sure the egg yolk is completely broken up and combined with the water. Then brush a light layer of the egg wash over the top of your dough. One of the signature markings of a baguette and pretty much almost any Italian bread is that crusty outside and a soft inside. So this is what is going to give you that crusty outside. Place your loaf in your preheated oven. Bake at 400 degrees for 25 to 30 minutes or until the loaf is golden and a tester comes out clean. Once the bread is done baking, remove it from your oven, then allow it to cool in the pan for at least 30 minutes so it can firm up. After 30 minutes, grasp the overhanging parchment paper and carefully lift your loaf out of the pan, then transfer it to a wire rack, then allow it to cool completely before slicing the loaf into your desired slices.
Okay, we are back. We've got my little loaf of bread. I've cut some of the pieces off so you can kind of hopefully see the texture there. Nice and soft, nice and moist, nice crusty outside like a baguette loaf's supposed to be. It's supposed to have that hard crusty outside and a little bit of a moist inside. So we got all that. That's good. You can eat it cold, room temperature, whatever you want to do with this thing. I am going to be using it to make my bruschetta chicken. So anyway, looks good, has nice texture, looks like. Let's see what this tastes like. I'm just going to tear a piece off of this other sliced just because I can. That had a really good taste. Between the yeast and the seasonings that I added to the bread, it really does not have a coconut flour taste to me. I mean, maybe it's just because I'm used to coconut flour bread, but it really, really has tamed that. And this, I think, is one of my favorite coconut flour bread recipes that I've made. Likey, yes.
You can eat this bread immediately. If you do have any leftovers, you can store it in an airtight container at room temperature for up to 3 days, or in an airtight container in your refrigerator for up to 5 days, or you can store it in a freezer-safe container and freeze it for up to 3 months. If you do decide to freeze the bread, make sure you slice it before you freeze it and place some parchment paper in between each one of the slices. That way, when you're ready to actually use the bread, you can just take out however many slices you want and let them thaw on your countertop for a couple minutes. Eat and enjoy.
And that's our recipe of the day. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did and you want to see more videos like this, make sure you click that thumbs up like button, click that subscribe button, leave me a comment if you want to. Let me know if there's any recipes that you'd like to learn how to make, and I'll do what I can to get those out there for you. And as always, keep cooking.